Greetings Guardians, my name is Bife here. So today I wanted to do some speculation on something that had me really hyped when it was revealed some time ago, and that is Ash and Iron. Back in the Edge of Fate reveal, Bungie confirmed that the first free Into the Light style update, which is slated to come 3 months after the Edge of Fate, would be called Ash and Iron, and that it would feature a return to the Plague Lands. This, for me and a ton of others who have been around since Destiny 1, was a really awesome announcement because it was a return to some of the coolest times of OG Destiny 1 during Rise of Iron, when we saw some of the most awesome themes in the game collide with Siva and the Iron Lords. So today I wanted to discuss all of this and go over what we might see in the update and what I'd love to see from an update that involves the Plague Lands. So, first and foremost, these free updates are a bit of an unknown. We don't know how much narrative stuff we'll get with them, and we also don't know exactly what activities we'll get. Into the Light is a really cool idea of what might happen with the kind of, massive stuff that was added there, between Onslaught, Pantheon, the returning exotic missions, and just the awesome weaponry and the interesting narrative premise that it was all wrapped up in. It was a very hype period of the game, and returning to the Plague Lands might recapture at least a little bit of that. However, there are a few things that I'm pretty sure we know are not going to be in there, and for one, whilst I don't think they've discussed it, I'm pretty sure they have said that Wrath of the Machine is not returning anytime soon, and it's unlikely as a result that we will see it in the Ash and Iron update. There are some possible things that we could see, so I'm going to address all of that topic by topic. Starting off with the basics. What are the Plague Lands? Well, they're a section of the Cosmodrome that was sealed off long ago by Lord Saladin. The Iron Lords entered the Plague Lands in order to recover Siva, and before then, it was just another part of the Cosmodrome. Siva is what changed that. It was unleashed across this area and ravaged it, all thanks to Rasputin. But what is Siva? Siva is a Golden Age nanite technology that was instrumental to building up our Golden Age civilization. It could be used to assemble habitats within the space of hours, but normally would take days, months, or weeks to assemble by hand. Rasputin used it as a weapon, and turned it on the Iron Lords when they came to recover the nanites, leading to it spreading out across the whole area like a mechanical plague, hence the name Plague Lands. It can be seen all over the environment in Rise of Iron when it returns from dormancy. The difference, of course, is that this is a plague of a mechanical nature, not a biological one. Siva was dangerous because it wasn't something so easily destroyed by our powers of light. Don't get me wrong, it could be done, but nanites are tiny, and destroying any individual one might be fine, but they came along in swarms, and they could break through the armor of Guardians, contorting their flesh and neutralizing them. Don't get me wrong, the Guardians wouldn't necessarily die. Some of them were still alive, and the Siva would twist and contort them, corrupting their flesh and forcing them to do whatever the Siva willed. Whatever commanded the Siva could effectively puppet these Guardians. This is what we saw at the conclusion of the Rise of Iron campaign, with the remnants of Yolda, Felwinter, and Gelion. Saladin sealed the Siva replication complex and the Plague Lands until the new Siva crisis in Rise of Iron reared its ugly head. In this period of time, the House of Devils Splicers found it and used the Siva to make Cyborg Fallen out of their splicers. Since then, the Siva has mostly been abandoned, and the Plague Lands with it. It's an awesome location, home to more of Golden Age Russia, which is a classic Destiny location, but it's also home to some iconic landmarks. Of course, there's the locales of the Wrath of the Machine raid, including the Great Wall, and of course the Perfection Complex. And then there's the more overtly Splicer-themed stuff, the Archon's Forge and the massive tower that adorns it, that still stands above the Replication Complex where Saladin's friends met their end. In the middle of all of this, of course, Siva's red and black tendrils and metallic growths are everywhere, with strange formations that taint the landscape and lent themselves to this honestly incredibly unique Destiny aesthetic. But what lore and story beats might we uncover in a place like the Plaguelands? Well, there's a few obvious ones, and let's start with the most obvious of all, the implications of the return of Siva itself. So if we're talking about the return of Siva, we need to talk about the return of everything around it. An important point is that lately most of the Siva we've found is dormant. Take, for example, the Siva that we discovered in the process of refining our new editions of Outbreak Perfected with Ada 1. Most of the Siva recovered from the Cosmodrome was dormant, not active. This means that it's not spreading out of control, not replicating, and it's probably not getting a command that it's following. For those that aren't aware, this is how Siva nanites work. They need a command in order to function. For a group to properly weaponize or just use the technology of Siva, they probably need something powerful to interact with it and ensure that it's no longer dormant. Now, it's not impossible that this greater power needed for Siva isn't actually greater in terms of being something like, say, the Witness, or even just a powerful servitor. No, it could just be a very technologically capable group of people that would be able to lead the charge for a greater group that is either integrated alongside, beneath, or above them. As far as who would use it though, that remains to be seen. There are many groups who would want to make use of a powerful weapon like Siva, but of course the most likely contenders are the Fallen. They are classical machinists with their propensity to make great wonders out of what is effectively trash. And given their history with the Plaguelands, I find it very unlikely that we'll see them out of Ash and Iron. There is also an interesting possibility, however, that I wanted to discuss, but it does contain minor spoilers for Edge of Fate's first mission, which I discussed with Milo in a separate video. So if you want to skip that, and everything that might be a spoiler, please head to the timestamp on screen for the next section. So, previously we saw that the raid boss in Rise of Iron was Axis, the Archon Prime. This is a title that's also been claimed by the Archon of the House of Exile over on Kepler, namely Archon Prime. If we are able to foil his plans in Edge of Fate, it's not impossible that he'd try to find another way to maintain his influence and power in the future, namely by bridging the gap and ascending in a different way, to the old mechanical way in which the Eliksni used to find godhood, by achieving apotheosis by merging with machines, becoming a cyborg, and then entirely mechanical. Okay, spoiler over. If Siva does return, it'll mean a lot for the world of Destiny, as some groups within the city and humanity at large will be able to make use of Siva for the wider populace and Guardians. The benefits to Earth generally and to Guardian weaponry will be, well, pretty remarkable. Except there is a bit of a problem here. Siva is now a bit outdated. The proof comes from Lightfall, and namely Quicksilver Storm, and the technology of the Neomuni, which includes their own form of nanites, based on Siva, but advanced over hundreds of years. The nanites the Neomuni use are ubiquitous throughout their city and technology, and they are far more powerful than Siva, according to the lore of the Quicksilver Storm. Perhaps the only advantage Siva tech has here is that if we're tracing back the origins of how the Neomuni improved on the nanites, they did so with the incorporation of some Vex technology, and maybe this represents the only advantage that old Siva has over these newer nanites. It does not necessarily have the same vulnerability to corruption by the Vex. The question then becomes, why not get our Neomuni allies to lend us some of their interesting new nanites instead? The Vex concern is a relevant one, but the Neomuni have been using this technology for years, and for them it's worked out great. Nothing seems to be corrupted by the Vex in Neomuna, thanks to this nanite fluid usage. There are Vex incursions, but that happens through seemingly any technological bridge. Take a look at the arcade, for instance. So, no, I don't think it's a huge concern. However, this then brings us to that interesting question. Are the Neomuni willing to work with us and lend us their nanite technology? This leads to some interesting political concerns and questions, but ultimately I don't think it's too far of a stretch. We helped to defend their city, and they're starting to understand that we are not the old barbarian warlords that they thought we were. Having them lend us a tool like their nanites is a little bit of an interesting proposal, but I don't think it's too out of the question. Siva as a tool for pushing technological development across the system with other factions, though, is still really relevant, because ultimately it might undercut some of the technological supremacy of the Neomuni, not all of it, but some of it, and there are definitely other factions out there who would be interested in using Siva. If it doesn't necessarily undercut all of the influence of Neomuna technologically, it does still have an impact on a smaller scale, but narratively. Because, well, Siva needs something to control it, or someone. And if it's going to be reactivated on a broader scale, I think there's someone out there with a very old name that might become relevant in this regard. It's in this moment that we need to ask that question of who might be able to reactivate the dormant Siva, who would be the leader that would control it. There is one character that comes to mind definitively. The Warmind Rasputin. He was the last one to control the Siva and give it a definitive command against those that he perceived as his enemies. He is also the only one who has proven capable of giving it any significant command in any capacity. Others have merely been able to contort it and use it in vague manners. But even Axis, according to some of the old lore, had voices in the back of his head, implying that maybe Rasputin was still controlling him. Any remaining Siva that is no longer dormant would probably still be dancing to Rasputin's last commands. And even if there's a lot of dormant Siva out there, there might still be active clusters of it here or there in the system. But of course, all of this is a moot point. Rasputin is dead after all. Oh well. Or is he? Yeah, Rasputin is dead, but here's the catch. You see, if you watched the ending of the Season of the Seraph, you know that Rasputin sacrificed himself to prevent the victory of Xivu-Arath, Eramis, and the forces of the Witness. It was a really important moment in the story of the Light and Dark saga. It was importantly something that followed in the footsteps of the Guardian Creed, aka devotion inspires bravery, bravery inspires sacrifice, sacrifice leads to death. Combine this noble sacrifice with the fact that Rasputin was given a physical exo-frame, his sacrifice led to his death, and that part of his memories included the incorporation of a former guardian in the form of Felwinter and Felspring, his ghost, and suddenly you have a very tantalizing question that arises. Namely, is there a chance that Rasputin might be risen as a guardian from that broken exo-frame? And if so, is it possible that this newly risen form, which might have access to some of the old Warmind construct data, as well as some of Felwinter's old Siddhartha Gola systems, might be able to interface with Warmind systems across Sol generally and regain control of Siva and some of the old constructs that it created? If this is the case, there are a lot of questions that arise. Questions such as, if this theoretical guardian does appear, will they be Rasputin or Felwinter or someone else? If it is Felwinter again, can a guardian be resurrected twice? Whose personality would take primacy out of the two of them if either was to become relevant, or would a third personality appear out of nowhere? And would this new being resurrected from the light have any memories from either of their past lives, or would only one set of their memories be erased? There's a lot of questions you could continue to ask, but if there's meant to be something even approaching a significant narrative addition in Ashen Iron, then this might fit the bill. The return of Siva, the Warmind, and an ancient Iron Lord all at the same time. All while we potentially guide someone who doesn't know they have a great destiny and might not remember any of this, and yet who will be fated to guide Siva and perhaps reclaim the title and glory of the Iron Lords themselves. Speaking of Iron Lords, we should talk about another place we might go in Ashen Iron. Now, as I have said and has probably become very obvious with this, if the iron in Ash and Iron is something to be interpreted closely with Destiny's lore, then we're going to get some Iron Lord content with this update. If we're going back to the Plaguelands, then we're bound to go back to another major area nearby that involves the Iron Lords really intimately. A place which we actually have some territorial control over now after the time of the Witness's defeat. Felwinter Peak, the Vostok Observatory. If this is a correct assumption, and if there are links to a potential return of Felwinter, then it's almost guaranteed that the mountain named after him, Felwinter Peak, will be our base of operations. Lord Saladin and his Iron Warbeast Cabal might come back so that they can keep this ancestral seat of power safe from imposing hands. There is, of course, the further likelihood that Saladin will be included in this story. There is also the potential for something from Aphrodite, but I'll be honest, I can't remember if she's alive or dead. I know that there have been indications and hints that she might still be out there, but equally I can't help dodge the feeling that there was some update to her story that implied she had fallen. Someone in the comments will probably be able to correct me better on that. Either way, this isn't the first time we've interacted with the Iron Lords in the past. In Rise of Iron, we helped lay the Iron Lords as a whole to rest, and in doing so, we established a whole new generation of Iron Lords. But there's been a long-running meme that this great triumph was sort of ignored by the game at large. Saladin having amnesia of him no longer being the last Iron Lord might be a bit of a joke, but this is a real moment at which we can sort of help reinforce that old title. Helping to finally reclaim Earth's wilderness and bring about peace for the city at last was a goal of the Iron Lords in ancient times, and I feel like we might actually push to accomplish this in this present moment. If we did finally manage to do this, it would be an interesting gameplay possibility of us trying to reclaim territory instead of merely skirmishing with enemies on it. It was supposed to be the purpose of the Iron Lords. Their destiny was to accomplish this so that they might bring about a new golden age for humanity. And by doing this, after our war with the Witness has been concluded, we might be fulfilling that call at last. This isn't the most exciting of tasks on paper. You need enemies in order for it to be interesting, and you need decent loot. We'll get to that in a moment. The other three characters that I think are worth mentioning if all this comes up would be Shiro 4, Crow, and Tyra Khan. Tyra has an interesting connection to the Iron Lords and Felwinter Peak. She was there during the Siva Crisis, and more importantly, she was more knowledgeable on the Iron Lords than most others. She is also a Guardian and has some close interactions with Lord Saladin, so her expertise in this manner is most welcome. Then of course there's Shiro 4, another key member of the Siva Crisis team, a previous close confidant of Cayde 6 and Andal Brask, and one who set us out on the mission for the Wrath of the Machine raid, where we would ultimately go to put an end to the plans of the House of Devils before they materialized. And then of course there is Crow, and I mention him because he has close ties to the Eliksni, but also because of his close ties to Saladin, as a member of the Hunter Vanguard, and the one who now wields the Iron Lord's axe. I feel as though there's a natural fit for him in this kind of update as well. Speaking of the Iron Lord axe, it might actually return in the form it did in D1. It was a momentary relic that would drop and would allow us to claim a lot of power in a short span of time. But I think that if we're going to look at the more exciting stuff, there's loot to be had with the Iron Lords that we might be able to recover. Speaking of which... yeah, we had to get to this moment where we talked about weapons. From the very start, there are some Rise of Iron weapons that never made it into Destiny 2. Yes, we have the Trespasser and the Outbreak Perfected, which used to be the Outbreak Prime, but there are other exotics that never made it into Destiny 2, namely Nemesis Star, and more crucially for the Iron Lords, the Young Wolf's Howl. They have never been brought forward. Now, here's an interesting discussion. We can be pretty sure that we're not going to get Wrath of the Machine back, and I imagine that Young Wolf's Howl would be a prime candidate for a peak raid exotic for that content. so I'm hesitant to suggest that it might be a thing we recover in this moment and in this place. But I think that in the process of recovering the relics of the Iron Lords, we might definitely find a bunch of old iconic weapons that were left behind from Destiny 1, some of which don't have massive lore implications and some of which pretty much do. Just to name a few names, Yolda's Hammer, Timur's Lash, Ifrit's Spear, the Clever Dragon, the Distant Star, Radagast's Fury, Scory's Revenge. There are more iconic weapons that can be returned to us than just Felwinter's Lie, even if that was by far the greatest menace of them all. And then, there is another avenue by which Bungie could bring us back some old tools. The Siva itself, and the weapons that were forged from it. The Chaos Dogma, Genesis Chain, Steel Medulla, Fever and Remedy, Sound and Fury, and of course, the Ex Machina. These are weapons we could also recover as a means of bringing back more of our old power from the Siva. But again, I caution this particular point because I feel as though reacquiring them would leave the possibility of getting them again in Wrath of the Machine as a closed thing. And I feel like if Bungie doesn't have plans for it now, they might still want to leave those weapons on the table so that there's a chance that they could return them in the future. Again, they don't necessarily have plans right now, but the possibility of it coming back in the future is something that I don't want to put aside. Now, this isn't to say that this is all you might find. There are some more esoteric trinkets that might be acquired, including the old artifacts of the Iron Lords. Now, to be clear, these were a part of a very different Destiny 1 artifact system, and they'd probably need to be completely different in form and function in Destiny 2. But they represent a really interesting possible source of power, maybe in the form of fragile gear or mods that could be acquired for the update. The buffs these things used to give were really powerful as well. They included things like regenerating your allies' super more quickly if your super was also charged, removing your super and giving you extra grenade and melee charges, allowing sword blocks to deflect projectiles, including supers in the Crucible, and even momentarily turning enemies to your side by meleeing them. Yeah, you remember that? Wild time with Timur's artifact. I almost didn't remember it, but it's cool, and it's happened, and it reflects his place as kind of the technomancer-necromancer force within the group. These would be more cool pieces of loot to acquire, and some of them could unlock cool mechanical edits to your playstyle, or perhaps even new playstyles entirely if they're implemented correctly. And last, but not least, I have got to talk about one of my White Whale items that I think I really want to see in Destiny at some point in the future, even though it is a long shot. Take a look at this. This Titan artifact has been an Iron Lord obsession of mine for years. It's the remnants of the Blade of Radagast. Radagast was one of the 4 founding members of the Iron Lords, alongside Perun, Saladin, and Yolda. If the Iron Lords are an analogue to King Arthur's Knights of the Round Table, then Radagast is King Arthur himself. A king, for certain, but a first amongst equals who embarked on a doomed quest for Siva, the Destiny equivalent of the Holy Grail. Even though he was the one that spurred the Iron Lords to action and brought the initiative, and even founded the group, he was not the only leader amongst their number. Perun may have been a great strategist, and Scory may have led them with battle songs, but Radagast has always been seen as the King Arthur analogue. And then there's the flavor text of this artifact, the Broken Blade of Radagast. It reads, "So long as this sword was whole, the Iron Banner could not be broken." If you're connecting the dots, you can see that this is basically the broken Destiny equivalent of the legendary sword of King Arthur, Excalibur. A sword that, according to the mythology, could only be wielded by rightful rulers and which would lead kings and their kingdoms into legend and glory. A blade bestowed by something ethereal, or perhaps even something divine. A blade that in Destiny, much like the Iron Lords that followed under it, has long been broken. I don't know about all of you, but I have been waiting for close to a decade for them to reforge the Destiny equivalent of Excalibur. It isn't confirmed, but it seems likely that it was broken by the Siva in the Iron Lord's assault on the replication complex. You can even see Radagast using a blade that might be this same weapon very briefly in a few frames of the opening cutscene of Rise of Iron. All of this before he gets completely obliterated by a stream of nanites. If we do see a return of Felwinter or Rasputin in the form of a Guardian, perhaps we could see the sword returned to their hand, reforged anew, and not just reforged in a way that would make him some kind of returning king, but also reforged with Siva. A king that would therefore be blessed by both the Siva and the Traveler's Light might unite these powers and ultimately reclaim the land that was lost during humanity's collapse. Now, I hear you all, reforging it with Siva? That sounds a bit weird, but the idea is not novel. We recently used dormant Siva clusters to help refine the newer iterations of Outbreak Perfected, and back in the day of Rise of Iron, we used Siva clusters that were active to help recreate a new Iron Yalahorn from the remnants of fallen Iron Lord armor. It's not an unprecedented path, and I think it'd be an amazing way to return a weapon that I consider to be a true legendary weapon in the actual true meaning of the word, to Destiny at large. The greater focus of the narrative here and what it means for the Fate saga also ties in pretty nicely. In short, Excalibur isn't just a weapon, it's a call to destiny, it's a call to fate. It is the destiny of the true King of England, or Albion as it's sometimes referred to in some iterations of the story, to wield this blade. Arthur claims it and the throne of Albion thanks to this blade and the divine right bestowed by it. That in itself is a way of commenting on the destiny of that character as a concept. By merely claiming the blade, they are embracing their legacy, their responsibility, their future, and perhaps the curse that comes with their death. It's all a very interesting set of possibilities, and I think it expresses ideas of the Fate saga really nicely. It's a really interesting way of expressing that our fate might not be in our control, and that higher powers might be determining its course. So if we're linking all of this to the greater Fate saga, again, I feel like this would fit really well. And all of that comes from a single artifact, and I will remind you, this thing is a blue. God, why is it a blue? Like, what the hell, Bungie? Why is this not an exotic weapon? What the hell's going on? Oh, holy missed opportunity from 10 years ago. Anyway, it's a long shot, but I live in hope for this. Ash and Iron has been mentioned a grand total of once, but the fact that it's able to conjure a 30-odd minute video out of me shows that it has some awesome story potential. And you know what? A lot of people in the community, I think, would be really excited to return to the Plaguelands. All of this, however, is just my opinion. I want to know yours down below. What would you want to see from Ash and Iron? What do you think we'll see, knowing that the scope of this thing is smaller than an expansion, but potentially something close to Into the Light? If you enjoyed the video, go ahead and leave a like, and if you want more Destiny content and content from worlds near and far, go ahead and hit subscribe and the bell next to subscribe to turn on email notifications. But as per usual, know that your viewership, as always, has been quite enough for me, and that in the meantime, my name is Bife. Rodacia ad Astra. I'll see you, Starside.